the governments, the world governments and individual state governments, like countries, they should be treating AI with the same mindset that they were treating nuclear energy.
Hello, my name is Katie Burdett. I'm your host of this season of the RedPenned podcast, where we have been assessing the art of writing and AI. All season we've been looking at AI and writing and how it is drastically impacting the writing space these last few years. And this is actually the first episode where we're getting a student perspective on AI and the collegiate space. So for this episode, we'll be focusing on a student perspective, and more specifically, a perspective in the computer and political sciences. This week's guests are the brilliant and, more importantly, my friends, Ben Reddy and Akash Agrawal. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves a little and just kind of tell me what your major is, interests, anything like that?
Sure. My name is Ben Reddy. I'm a computer science student here at UGA. I'm also studying data science, financial technology, and I'm getting an area of emphasis in artificial intelligence.
Hi, my name is Akash Agrawal. I'm a poli-sci and econ double major. I am going to be most likely doing research with economics and AI next semester, so AI is a field of interest to me.
So I know we talk about this all the time, kind of outside the camera. We were having a conversation about it before I even turned it on. But can you just go over a little bit how you've seen AI in your specific disciplines and maybe related to the classroom and how you've reacted to that interaction?
Yeah, so I personally use AI a lot for my college courses, my homework assignments, and to help myself study. I primarily use tools such as ChatGPT to help me better understand specific concepts, or even help me with specific homework questions that I might be having trouble getting through. I've also used from time to time image generating tools for presentations. Yeah.
I would say I have a similar experience in terms of using image generation tools for projects and stuff. I don't have a lick of artistic bone in my body, so being able to generate like a logo or something is really useful. Sometimes also, quick answers to questions I have. And in the case of ChatGPT, at least for CS, its ability to write and debug code is also pretty helpful.
So maybe in terms of assignments, have you been met with any specific assignment that deals with AI? So for you, something in coding, and then for Akash, maybe in your papers. I know I talked to a lot of professors who say they're trying to incorporate AI in their classrooms this semester, and either kind of doing the anti-paper, I don't know if you know what that is, but assigning AI to write you a paper and then you kind of write a response as to correcting it or improving it or just all out debunking it. But for you guys, you tend to work with AI in a lot of instances. Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, so the thing is that one of the books that we were reading for my political science class, it's a more morality-based class. So one of the books that we were reading is called The Precipice, and it's about existential crises about humans, right? So the book dives deeper into specific ways that humans might go extinct or human progress might be hindered. One of the topics that the book dives deeper into is something called AGS, which is Artificial General Superintelligence. So not specific assignments, but we are definitely tackling moral questions about AI.
And for me, I've coded some neural networks and machine learning models for data science courses, but that's more specific to data analysis specifically. So that's an example of a narrow AI that's not something like a complex language learning model. It's a very basic, simplistic, narrow-minded AI that solves the specific tasks, and it's really cool to see what neural networks can do. But in terms of coursework and assignments related to it outside of pure coding, I've talked a lot about AI, and we've discussed a lot of AI in my human-computer interaction course, where we've talked about human-centered AI, the ethics of AI, the transparency of AI, and we've also touched on artificial general intelligence or superintelligence, and the importance of companies to make AI as transparent as possible. So I've tackled it both from a very introductory coding perspective, but more so from an ethical perspective as well.
Yeah, that actually follows really well into my next question that I had, especially for you then, because Akash, you mentioned that you took that morality class. Have you guys been introduced to things like ethics in your courses where you, I know specifically, are tasked with making this software? So it's like, are you being told like from the jump, like, hey, this is something that you need to be careful of, or anything like that going forward?
So for like data science and other pure coding courses, maybe not as important because we understand that it's a very narrow, small AI used within the scope of like an assignment. So it's not really going to have any far-reaching implications. But yes, training it, understanding the errors that can go into training an AI is definitely a huge part of both like the coding and the ethical part of considerations. One, if you, from a data perspective, if you go in with bad data and you train your model on bad data, you're going to get bad output. It's not going to do its task successfully, and you either end up with like a skewed version of the data or something even completely incorrect. And then for like human-computer interaction, we've talked a lot about not only can it make your data incorrect, but it can also have like a lot of far-reaching implications. Like a model having unintended consequences, being discriminatory towards a certain group of people. A great example of this is like if you train a like AI model on like data that is based on like racist assumptions, it might come to like racist conclusions. Even if you have a huge data set, if your data set is very narrow-minded in focus, like let's say I want to make a facial recognition software and I train it only on like primarily Eurocentric faces, that facial recognition software is going to be a lot worse at identifying black or brown faces compared to white faces, which is what we've seen actually a lot of in terms of like AI facial recognition technology. So the companies have continually had to like make the conscious effort to like remove bias not just from models, but also like sample data and like a population of who they're doing a study or training the model on.
So actually a lot of my interviews have been talking about LLMs and like ChatGPT and stuff like that, and we've seen it kind of more on the academic scale in terms of like high school, college, whatever. But I just was curious about you guys' opinions on more like highly functioning AI in like the college space, but also like in the U.S. political scape, like especially for you, Kosh, because you're in poli-sci, but like how are you guys feeling about kind of like the larger, more threatening, quote unquote, like AI models?
That could have negative implications if it is unaligned with humanity's goals of prosperity of humanity. In the political landscape, there are some conceptual ideas about AI governments, but more realistically in the current landscape is the use of face swap technologies, which are also based on AI, right? So, like using face swap technologies to create political ads or to distort things that are happening in the real world in like war, or to generate videos that do not actually exist.
As for how it's going to impact like the political system writ large, I would be worried a little bit about like political interference. We already struggle a lot from things like misinformation and disinformation online, and AI is like very receptive to getting manhandled or misused for that purpose, you know?
Yeah.
Like it can be very easy to just use AI to generate tons and tons and tons and tons of disinformation or misinformation. And we already see like a ton of bots on social media. And it's only going to get worse, right? As functional models get better. So that's one way I think it's going to impact the political system. The other way I think it's going to impact the political system is division of power and relationship of like the government's power to the power of like big tech. We've already seen the power of like lobbying and big tech companies increase over time as they've become more and more rich and developed more and more software and technology. But another thing to realize is like the companies making these foundational models are the big tech companies. Because they cost millions of dollars to create and they require so many like computer processor hours and like man hours to build, it really restricts the amount of people that can, or amount of organizations that can build such a foundational model. So it's not like, you know, your average college research team can build a foundational model. Almost all of the popular foundational models that we have out there currently are built by private tech companies, whether it's your Facebook, your OpenAI, your like Google, whatever. what this means is that those companies are the only ones who have access to like their training data, their training models, the risks of their training data set, their population of their training data set. And a lot of times they're not really giving that information out. They're not being very transparent. So if they're the ones who control all the power when it comes to like making those foundational models, training those foundational models, I think they could exert even more power and influence on government than they currently do.
Mm-hmm. I want to push you a little bit on this, not to corner you or anything, but I feel like we talked a little bit before this, and both of you kind of expressed to me that you were pro tech, right? Pro AI, that type of thing. Not to use pro so liberally, but that you guys are like kind of comfortable in that space, right? But it seems that you're pretty hypercritical of big tech kind of coming in and like making this an ethical dilemma, and making a problem, and throwing that money just irresponsibly anywhere. But a lot of computer science majors that I've met, at least, you know, aspire to work for the Facebooks and for the Metas and for the things like that. So are you kind of in that camp of being like, well, if you can't beat them, join them? Or are you like, it's our responsibility to make it better? Like, how do you feel like you fit in as a pre-career person going into a space that daunting, I guess?
So that's a great question. Me, myself, I like have jumped onto that, you know, I guess bandwagon. Like I'm doing my area of emphasis in AI. I plan to get a master's in AI. I think the reason why so many computer scientists are so eager to join in on it is because at a foundational level, it's just really cool. Like it is groundbreaking technology, right? Like every time some new technology comes out that changes a field, it provides a lot of opportunities for career advancement, career growth, exploration of new like companies. So it provides a lot of opportunities for students in that discipline. So obviously they're going to be a lot more pro towards it. For me, that's the main driver for me. I think it would provide a lot of opportunities like going into AI, and it's just a very interesting topic to me. It seems like something that like if it's a cutting edge technology, I would love to research it. I think the other thing though, as to why I myself am pro AI, but I'm still very hypercritical of things like big tech, is because similar to the internet, there's a huge potential for good and a huge potential for bad. Obviously, AI, if placed in the wrong hands or used for the wrong reasons, can be very destructive, whether it's disinformation, misinformation, or leveraging power and information with like selective tech companies, right? However, it also has a lot of good uses, right? Like human-centered AI, you know, using AI to augment people's abilities and, again, like lower the skill floor so that more people who would have been barred from entry from like doing a job or like learning previously tougher to access information can gain access to that information. So for me personally, I want to use AI, and I want to like, I'm so like eager to join AI, not only for the career growth and the opportunities, but also because if you tackle it from a perspective of steering it in the direction of like social good, you can use this technology to like improve society. However, if you get lax on, you know, those tech companies that are messing up or that are not being transparent, then you're not steering it in a good social direction anymore. You know, you're steering it towards the direction of profit.
AI has a lot of potential. It also has, as Ben was saying, a lot of negative things that can come with AI. In my opinion, governments should be treating AI with the same mindset and with the same, not fear, but the same caution, at least, that they were treating nuclear energy in the 40s, 50s, 60s. AI can create abundance. AI can create so much so fast. That means it can reduce costs of committing certain actions, or yes, it will remove jobs. That's where the cost efficiency is going to come. It's that overall, when there's cost efficiency and cost reduction, that brings an overall positive economic impact on all of society. But I think this kind of friction and job losses occurs at the advent of any new technology. That happened with the Industrial Revolution, where individuals who were doing certain tasks by hand now were automated. But it also opened up, I think we should be looking at AI in the long run and we should always be looking at, in my opinion, we should be looking at humanity in the long run. And when we're looking at the long run, AI's impact on economics and is definitely going to bring a lot more positivity than negativity.
On that too, I guess, what do you guys feel like has been the biggest positive thing that's come out of AI in your disciplines? Especially in terms of, because the whole season of this podcast has been about writing. I mean, whether it be writing code, writing essays, like how do you feel that AI has impacted positively your discipline, and more specifically your own personal form of writing?
It's really re-incentivized interest in computer science. I feel like it's such a popular field of study because, you know, in the information age with like the internet, computers like are a lens through which we do so much of our lives and a lens through which we interact with so much of the world. And a lot of students study it because of that. But now that we're having like another breakthrough technology that has a huge potential for change, it re-incentivizes interest to like study that field, which means that that field's only going to get more developed and more innovation will come out of it.
In the case of writing, I have noticed, at least in the past couple of weeks, is that in the case of writing, it shrinks my thought. Because before AI, if I were to write something, I would have a variety of different thoughts. I would lay them out and then craft my own sentences. Whereas with AI, when it generates a sentence that I really like, there could have been something else in its place when I was doing it by myself. It takes away from a thought that I might have had to write that sentence in the first place, or to develop on that sentence. So that's what I mean when it shrinks my thought and concentrates it rather than broaden it. But when I'm trying to teach myself, that's when it helps me broaden my field. So in the case of writing, there are both pros and cons. Helping understand things conceptually, that's the pro. It takes away from your thinking where you might have done the thinking. That's the con.
I would completely agree. I think even in my personal experience, the more dependent a person becomes on ChatGPT to do like writing tasks, even something like busy work, the less critical thinking skills they're using. You're not practicing active recall for a subject if you're using it to like generate responses to like a question, like for a homework assignment. You're not thinking critically about how do you structure and format your essay or your thoughts if you're using it to generate your outline for you. And even like we've talked about it from both the perspective of like writing code and like writing English. In both cases, I think the same underlying principle of if you let it do it for you and you don't take the time to analyze it thoroughly, you're not really engaging with it. You're not using your critical thinking skills, and you're not learning it as effectively as if you were to try and write that piece of code or write that paper on your own.
Yeah, I know we kind of saw like a big thing with COVID whenever that like spiked, and we had like a bunch of kids who stayed at home and like had to learn online, and they found tools like that and have only continued to use tools. Even the kids that I like run into in like community involvement and stuff like that are really, really reliant on ChatGPT. Like especially high schoolers, I've noticed, are really reliant on it. Like, how do you feel that that's gonna? I don't know. What are the implications of when they come into the college space and they try to be pre-professionals and they're seeing people who weren't introduced to that technology kind of going up against them in competition? Do you feel like the risk of burnout is like way too real at that point? Younger generations, I guess. Like, how do you feel that maybe stunts their thinking in the college space?
I think it's definitely a good thing because they're being introduced to new technology that's going to have immense impact in the future. And they are adapting to new technology quickly. Because if they don't adapt, and if schools stunt their ability to use this new technology, then they're going to be at a disadvantage compared to peers in the future who have used this technology.
So I actually disagree. I think it's twofold. One is if students become over-reliant on this technology and they lose their critical thinking skills, it puts them at a disadvantage. Yes, if like, I think it's similar to a situation where a student asks like, how come Why don't I just have a calculator in the future? Like, why do I need to learn like this like basic multiplication or like three-form like multiplication or division? And a teacher is like obviously going to be like, well, no, but you need to know it anyway. It's because like, yeah, everyone has an access to a calculator, but like if you go to a STEM field and you need to take higher level math and you're reliant on like a calculator for basic operations or even basic medium complex operations, it really slows down how effective you are at like solving a problem, and it can really like limit how effective you are at like learning a new topic. And that's like for a menial like repetitive task, right? So that's like, you know, the process of like finding a square root or multiplying or dividing. Even something as simple as like it's this exact same every single time. If a student becomes overly reliant on a piece of technology to do it, it's going to hamper them in the future when they have to use that skill in conjunction with other skills. Tying that into like AI and writing, if a student becomes overly reliant on AI to write, they can't compete as well at all, I think, with students who aren't reliant on AI to write.
So I feel like the discordance between you two is like the assumption of adaptation and the assumption of replacement. So I feel like what Akash was kind of saying was that adapting to ChatGPT and adapting to like LLMs in schools and stuff like that is the equivalent to adapting to the internet, where I feel like a lot of people who I've talked to on this podcast and also like Ben, I feel like you're more of the camp of like, oh no, it's not necessarily that kids are adapting, it's that they're replacing what is happening like in the schoolroom with what is happening on their computer. Whereas like with the internet, for example, we kind of like, we're scared of it at first, but then we realize, oh, this is just a big database, and like the website is really the defining factor here. Whereas with ChatGPT, it's the question that's the defining factor, and the system writ large is like the scary part of it, because it's like, I can look anything up on the internet, but that doesn't mean the internet's bad. Whereas with ChatGPT, I can look up anything, and maybe that's the problem. So like, the potential for students to replace what they're knowing with ChatGPT versus adapting to what they're learning by using like the technology. Is that like making sense? I feel like that's where you guys are kind of disagreeing.
Yeah, so let me use an example that you talked about, the calculator example. Yes, at the fundamental level, you're still going to have to understand concepts, like intuitively, I think, which ChatGPT can help accelerate the process of. But at the same time, when you're looking at more complex solutions today, like more complex math that is done, a computer can do it in an instant, right? Mm-hmm. We're replacing computers for certain tasks, such as in the calculator example. We're replacing, even for basic math, we're replacing calculators. In the same way, in the future, when tools become more accurate and better, it's going to be necessary to replace certain tasks anyway, so why do we not start today?
I think while yes, you can use technology to help replace a task, in the context of helping students learn, I believe the original question was like, do you think it gives certain students an edge over another? It's not that simple, right? It's like, it's easy to say like, yes, like if busy work is busy work, use ChatGPT for it because you're not learning from it anyway. But if a student is using it for non-busy work, like let's say writing an essay where they have to think critically about a position and defend it or argue against it, then they're losing out on the benefit of thinking through it and that critical thinking process. So it's not just a matter of it doing a task, it's also a matter of them losing out on a skill that they would have tangibly gained.
I guess education itself has to change. In the sense that rather than teaching students at the base level, like teachers individually teaching students how to do basic math, they teach students how to use AI to teach them how to do basic math.
I think that's a great like stepping point, because it's like, it's kind of the similar way of, it's way better to teach somebody how to use the internet than to just teach them one specific aspect of the internet. Like, let's say you're trying to get a student to research like 1900s history and write a paper on it, right? I mean, it's very useful to teach them directly that 1900s history so that they learn it and that it comes from like a accredited source. But it's also extremely useful to teach them the basic skills of like independent research so that they can then not only learn the content on their own, but also develop the skills of research so that they're, using critical thinking to identify pieces of information, source pieces of information, and then use it to support their own argument.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is like really interesting because I feel like we're all in different majors. I'm an English major, as you guys know, and like the way that or the method that you guys are like explaining makes I feel like no sense in my field. For example, like if I ask like AI to explain to me the plot of like Animal Farm and like give me the themes and give me what I should be thinking about, I still don't think I would get it. You know what I'm saying? Like I think I could read Animal Farm. I think that I could look at what it is that it's explaining to me, look at the themes, like what's it like pointing out, and I still don't think without a human-to-human interaction that I will get what that book is trying to get me to say. I think that a lot of people think about literature in this really stagnant way of like this book was written in this age and blah, 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 blah. But I view literature as a very fluid thing, and I don't think that AI has the capacity to understand the fluidity in which literature is supposed to be explored, personally. So I feel like for me, without talking and being in dialogue with the teacher or with a peer even about what we've just read and having two different brains thinking about it in two different ways coming from two different lifestyles, I don't think literature can be interpreted correctly.
That begs the question of like, well, if we make an AI smart enough, then can you understand it? Because right now we're at the point where AI and language learning models we don't know how primitive they are in the grand scheme of things.
Mm-hmm.
They could be pretty advanced, they could be reaching a tipping point, or they could be super primitive to like AGS or AGI, right? But let's say you develop an AGI that can think on the scale of a human, right? Mm-hmm. And you can not only ask it to explain it to you, but explain it to you from this perspective, from this perspective, from this perspective. It's like, it's not just one person's take on a book, it's like millions.
I think I understand Katie's issue with AI and literature, is that literature is dependent on human experience.
Yeah.
That's how it develops.
Yep.
Something that AI cannot replicate,
Yep.
because AI just is a large database, at least our current models of AI. So how would you replicate that same human experience to understand a literary source?
Mm-hmm.
If you make an AGI, right, and it can process like on the scale or above the scale of like a human, like that does not encapsulate, like it just knows more stuff than a human. Because obviously it's like, no human has the database of a machine, right? It's just you're never going to be able to know as much stuff as the internet. But the difference between like a regular old AI and like an AGI is that AGI would be able, in many cases, to think about things from human experience.
See, I also think I disagree with that just a little
Okay.
bit. I'm not trying to like push you on this, but I feel like
it's good.
I think for an AGS to exist, that so many people would have to be exploited in order for that thing to exist. In my understanding of how this would be developed, right? Or so many people would have been used for their experience in order to further this thing or train this thing or whatever. So I think that without the self-awareness of the fact that this thing was created on the backs of civilization, I still don't think it gets it. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like if, like...
It has to be conscious
I
about...
think it has to be conscious about the fact that...
Well, that's what AGI is.
It's a conscious... I think...
It is conscious.
Well, yeah, it's a very tricky definition, because we don't know what consciousness is.
Yeah.
Because consciousness is... Well, I don't know how to define consciousness. That's what I define it.
We're jumping, we're spiraling. I think what I was saying comes in twofold. I think in AGS, if it doesn't understand that it was created on the backs of other people, and if it doesn't understand its position in the world, it cannot replicate the human experience. Further, if it does understand that, it is unlike anything else, and so it cannot replicate the human experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, I think that that's one of the things that I have with it, is that I think no matter how you slice or dice it, whether it's self-aware or not, it is so unlike anything else.
So you think
It's an
literature?
individual entity.
So like literature as it's studied and understood in regards to to people depends on humans being at the intelligence level and experienceability and having the sensory capabilities we currently have.
Yeah, and even like could have, but in base terms, like I can't think about what I would think like 3,000 years from now. Whereas like an AI might, or an AGS might be able to conceptualize, oh, how much will I grow in 1,000 years? and I won't ever be able to understand that. And so the way I'm experiencing it, interpreting it right now is uniquely pertinent to the time, space, place, all that type of stuff. Okay, to kind of wrap everything up, because I know we've gone on a lot of branches. How do you guys feel that AI is going to influence your field in the future, or in the coming years? What are the implications? Do you feel like it's going to make it better? Do you feel like it's going to make it worse? What do you just feel like the future looks like in your field, looks like in your writing, and what are the ramifications of that, basically?
In the fields of political science and economics, in the academic fields, AI is definitely going to be a key factor in doing research. But when we're looking at law, for example, for political science, because I might do law in the future, law is very interesting in how it might be affected by something like AI and large language models like ChatGPT, because it has the ability to understand a large amount of context and large amounts of data of hundreds of court cases over hundreds of years. So it can conceptualize them, but the thing with law is that it is very naturally human. It is very human in the sense that it is humans who decide the law for themselves. So how would something like an AI, why would something like an AI play a key factor in something that is the most human that it can be, human governance? Mm-hmm. So yes, AI would be used as a tool for lawyers, I think, in the future, but I don't think it will replace lawyers.
But I think it's drastically going to change like the economic opportunities for that field, right? You're going to have people who want to join the field to study AI, but on a deeper level, I think it's also going to just increase innovation in the tech sector writ large, because we've both mentioned that it's like a huge productivity tool. Companies are not only going to be trying to make AI, but also using AI to try and generate new solutions. So you'll see like either an expansion of current products, creation of new products, and I think we're going to become more and more and more reliant on AI as more and more and more tech companies keep pushing it out. But I think it's a sign of many to come that like AI is going to take over more and more and more industries. Like it's going to play a larger role in healthcare, it's going to play a larger role in finance, it's going to play a larger role even in like literature. And I think driving that will be like people in computer science trying to innovate it and develop it further than it's been before.
So final question, I'm going to ask you to answer in one word, no elaboration. Considering all the things that we've talked about, is AI helpful or destructive and good or bad?
You can answer both of those. No elaboration. We're only given those 4 choices of words. We can't use other one word. Like, helpful and destructive is one category, good and bad is one category. So like helpful, bad, something like that. Complicated, complicated. The chaotic evil, like, yeah, like that.
So, in your own words, give me one word that you would use to describe AI and like 1 or 2 sentences to justify why you would give it that descriptor.
I'm going to use the criteria that you used earlier.
Okay.
I'm going to say destructive, good.
Destructive, good.
In the sense of creative destruction.
Okay.
That means that it's going to destroy old thoughts to create new, important ones for the next generations to come.
Okay.
For one word to describe AI, I would probably say breakthrough. As for the, 2 selectors, I would probably also say helpful, destructive. Same exact reasoning as Akash, but the reason I think it's like breakthrough is because either way, it's going to fundamentally change the way we operate with technology and fundamentally change like the day-to-day life of human experience.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming on the pod. I had a great conversation with both of you. I really appreciate your takes. So again, this is Ben, this is Akash. I'll put all their links down below, any information they might need to know. It'll be in the show notes. Any references that they made to books, professors, movies, whatever will be in the show notes. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Let's go!
Keep that in.
Keep that in.